So in this segment, we're going to be talking about Keir Starmer agrees with Leave voters' basic case for Brexit despite backing Remain. So Labour leader Keir Starmer has said he agrees with the basic case made by many Leave supporters during the 2016 referendum. Starmer said he understood the desire for more control from those who wanted the UK to quit the EU despite his own backing of Remain. During the Brexit referendum, he says, "I argued for Remain, but I couldn't disagree with the basic case that many Leave voters made to me." Starmer added, they wanted more control over their lives, they wanted more control over their country, they wanted to create opportunities for the next generation, build communities they felt proud of, have public services they can rely on. And I get the argument he's making here, but his arguing is a bit of a whitewash. Take back control to do what? Immigration was a big part of the Brexit argument. I say immigration, I mean xenophobia. The problem was that the EU was put on this almighty power, classed this almighty powerhouse that was holding back the UK and was, imposing laws on it. But in reality, it helped us to excel. I get the basic point about control, but we had that as EU members. We had that as an EU member. Now, in a lot of ways, we have less control. He says, and I know that in the Scottish referendum in 2014, many of those who voted yes did so for similar reasons. The same frustration at a Westminster system that seems remote. This point is a bit disingenuous. I think the Scots genuinely had more of a case for, quote, take back control. They were taken out of the EU against their consent in a referendum they didn't want in the first place. Given that a majority of their rules are made by Westminster, in which they have little say in, the only say they really get is the minority party of MPs that they have. That's about it. They don't get a ton of say. This was very different to the UK's membership of the EU, in which the UK agreed with a lot of what the EU did. To compare the Scottish referendum and the Brexit referendum, even in the context of taking back control, one was about a bad understanding of the EU, whilst the other was about national self-determination. And also, let's not forget here that during the Eurozone bailout, David Cameron managed to get an exemption from it that the UK wouldn't be involved in any Eurozone bailouts done by the EU. And, if the EU were so undemocratic, they wouldn't have allowed that. But it goes to show you that the arguments people use just don't make sense. Gordon Brown joined Starmer to unveil the report of the party's commission on the UK's future, with the ex-premier headed at a joint press conference in Leeds. Starmer hinted that some of the measures include a new Democratic Assembly of Nations and Regions to replace the Lords, which may have to wait for a second term because they're boring. New powers over transport infrastructure, development and planning, including compulsory purchase orders on vacant sites, would be handed to the devolved administrations, the mayors and the local authorities. The report also proposes a series of measures to clean up politics, including an anti-corruption agency, an integrity and ethics commission, and a ban on second jobs for MPs, which is actually a really good idea. The Labour leader, accused by the SNP of trying to out-Brexit the Tories, added, there is no case for going back to the EU or going back into the single market. I don't think there's a case for a better Brexit. So some of this stuff he's offered is pretty good, most of this stuff up here, but these are things we could have done as EU members. Pressed on whether rejoining the single market in the future could boost growth, he said, no, we left, and having left, there is no case now for going back and going into a single market and customs union. We've had this debate endlessly over the years 2016 to 2019, is effectively going back in. That's a bit of a weird statement. And, Keir Starmer also said when he was asked about growth, rejoining the single market and growth, he says, no, I don't think it will at that point. He adds, years of wrangling and uncertainty would hamper the economy, but he would push for a better trading deal with the EU. So Starmer said it was possible to improve on the existing hard Brexit deal with a new veterinary agreement for agri-foods and called for a compromise with the Northern Ireland Protocol. There is a whole host of ways we can move forward with a better set of arrangements. And this bit annoys me. How does Starmer expect to get a better deal without further negotiations with the EU, which could take months or years? He could say we can't rejoin the single market without EFTA membership or being a full member of the EU, but he doesn't, because that would be too easy, wouldn't it? I get that if we could somehow rejoin the single market, those negotiations would be far more complex over getting a more in-depth trade deal with the EU. Hopefully we can get some services covered, but it won't be like it was before. But in my opinion, to argue we can't rejoin the single market due to the wrangling and the uncertainty it would cause just doesn't sit right. He mentioned all of the uncertainty created by Johnson, but the problem was we were diverging from the EU and had no idea where we would end up. Single market access was under the table under May compared to what we got with Johnson is very different. Negotiating over further convergence with the EU would not create that sort of uncertainty, in my opinion, anyways. So Starmer, instead of burying the issue with what I use, the argument I use, He's just using bad faith arguments that will just annoy certain voters. Also, just because something is hard doesn't mean we should shy away from it. It doesn't make sense. And this is the situation in the UK. If you look at the other G7 members, and you've got the OECD average, I think, put in here, the US doing better than us, Canada, Italy, France, Japan, Germany doing better than us, minus 0.2 growth for us. The situation is that the UK needs something big. He can argue that the economic decline started under the Tories in 2010, but Brexit will make that small growth look like a joke in terms of damage. I just don't get the guy, honestly. For him to make these sorts of arguments don't make sense. It's painful. It's painful, people. It's painful. This is the Labour leader. This is who we're stuck with. I don't really have anything more to say apart from the fact that he doesn't make sense, and that's an issue I have, where the guy's got a really good lead in front of the Tories and he's choosing to come out with this nonsense. I mean, he's the only guy who could have a 3-0 lead and throw it away, I'll be honest. But anyways, let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Support the channel on Patreon if you can. And shouts out to Keir Starmer, who's the equivalent of Gareth Southgate at this point. But yeah, I'll catch you next time.